I met my wife Emily when we were both 15. We were high school sweethearts, and our relationship seemed perfect. We had minor fights like any couple, but nothing too serious. Looking back now, I realize I was always the one putting in most of the effort. Whether it was planning dates, starting conversations, or even initiating sex, it was usually me taking the lead. Emily enjoyed our time together, but she never put in the same level of effort. Our sex life was pretty active, ranging from several times a week to several times a day. I was the adventurous one, always wanting to try new things, but Emily was more reserved. She enjoyed oral sex, but she never wanted to give it, claiming it was dirty and disgusting. I let it slide, thinking it wasn't a big deal as long as we were happy together. Financially, I was more successful. Emily, on the other hand, preferred to focus on her hobbies and family. She eventually fell into a housewife routine, working part-time by choice. I never thought of her as a gold digger. I believed she just felt she had settled. I used to have bad acne, got my dental work done late, and wasn't in great shape. Emily never showed any signs of dissatisfaction, so I was clueless about her true feelings. 5 years into our relationship, and a year into our marriage, Emily met a guy at the gym. She claimed they were just friends, working out together and chatting online. They even went out for dinner sometimes. I had no idea about this new friend and didn't suspect anything. One weekend, she told me she was going on a trip with friends. I had to pay her share, but I didn't mind. She left on a Friday and came back on Saturday saying she had a fallout with her friend. She was depressed, crying throughout the day. I was worried about her, never suspecting the truth. That evening, she broke down and confessed she had cheated on me. I was numb, unable to process her words. When it finally sank in, I felt like I'd been hit by a sledgehammer. I left the room, threw up several times, and cried like a baby. Emily said it was a mistake, a short-lived crush. She felt a strong attraction to him, but after spending the night with him, she realized he didn't care about her. To make it worse, she admitted to doing things with him that she had always refused to do with me, like giving oral sex. I loved Emily deeply. Our relationship had weathered storms that others couldn't. My family loved her, and my friends liked her. People always told me how lucky I was, and I believed them. I showered her with affection, surprised her with gifts, and always put her first. Her pleasure mattered to me, even if she didn't reciprocate. The betrayal crushed me. I yelled at her, tears streaming down my face, asking why she did it. She said she didn't know, that she was weak and caught up in the moment. She begged for forgiveness, promising to change. She gave me complete transparency, quit the gym, and came clean to our parents. We booked marriage counseling and started individual therapy. I lashed out at her in anger, calling her names. She took it mostly, but sometimes she fought back, threatening to take me for all I was worth. Our parents urged me to stay, saying mistakes happen and we could grow stronger. Foolishly, I listened. It took months for my anger to subside. I never loved her the same way again, but I thought I loved the new her. She signed a post-nuptial agreement in my favor, giving up most support. She initiated more in our sex life, and it improved, but I refused to give her oral, disgusted by the thought. Despite her love for it, she never complained. For a few years, we were genuinely happy. I started going to the gym regularly, and my acne cleared up. I stopped checking up on her and trusted her again. She didn't go out much without me, and if she did, it was with mutual friends. Then about 6 months ago, things changed. I met a new female coworker after a restructuring at work. We hit it off, sharing mutual interests, and staying late at work to chat. I had no intention of taking it further, but old resentment and distrust resurfaced. I wondered why Emily couldn't stop her affair if I could rein myself in. She seemed to face no consequences, and everyone forgave her so easily. I started checking on her again, finding call logs and messages with a guy I considered a close friend. I was livid, ready to throw her out, but then I went cold. I didn't care anymore. Finding this killed any love I had left for her. The next day, I met with my coworker and started my own affair. It was liberating, shedding a weight I didn't know I had. I felt free and immediately contacted a divorce lawyer. I wanted out. I stayed out late, avoiding Emily, and she noticed. It took her a week to confront me. I came clean, telling her I knew about the calls and her secret contact with my friend. I told her about my affair in graphic detail. Seeing her hurt as she had once hurt me was liberating. She wailed, cried, and threw up. She claimed she wasn't having an affair, that they were planning a surprise party for my birthday. Then she did the unexpected. She pleaded for me to stay and make it work. I left, staying at a motel and cutting off all contact. She moved in with my parents, who bombarded me with messages, pleading and threatening. They sided with her, blaming me for running away from my responsibilities. My mother, who had her own affairs forgiven by my father, told me she'd take care of Emily until I came to my senses. Despite their claims, I found new love and even had a few casual hookups. I wasn't unattractive after all. Emily's claims about planning a surprise party didn't matter. I was done. This is where the story stands now. My parents expect me to come back, but I have no intention of doing so. I'm finally free, and I feel no remorse. If anything, we're finally even. So there I was, holed up in a dingy motel room, wondering how the hell my life had come to this. Honestly, it felt like one of those trashy soap operas my mom used to watch, where everyone's sleeping with everyone else, and nothing makes sense. The first night, I barely slept. I kept replaying everything in my mind, every fight, every moment of betrayal, and every tear that had fallen. I kept asking myself, how did I not see this coming? You see, Emily and I had been together since we were teenagers. Our relationship had always felt like this epic love story. We were supposed to be the couple that made it through anything. But looking back, I realized I had missed so many red flags. Like she never really reciprocated the effort I put in. Sure, she said she loved me, but actions speak louder than words, right? And her actions were always lukewarm at best. As the days went by, I started to feel more at peace with my decision. The relief of not having to pretend anymore was immense. I didn't have to force myself to look at her without feeling disgusted. I didn't have to endure the well-meaning but misguided advice from family and friends. Most importantly, I didn't have to live with the constant reminder of her betrayal. Emily, of course, didn't take things lying down. She bombarded me with messages, calls, emails, you name it. She even got our mutual friends to try and talk sense into me. It was all a bit much. I get that she was hurting, but so was I. The difference was I had made my peace with it. She hadn't. I remember one particular evening when I was at a bar near the motel, just nursing a beer and trying to clear my head. My phone buzzed with yet another text from her. This time, it was a long, rambling apology. She talked about how she had been in a bad place, how she felt lost and lonely, and how she never meant to hurt me. It was the same old story I had heard before. The words seemed hollow, and I couldn't find it in myself to feel any sympathy. After a week of avoiding her calls and messages, I finally decided to meet with my parents. They had been relentless, insisting that I come home and sort things out. Part of me was curious to see what they had to say, even though I already knew they would side with Emily. When I walked into their house, I was met with a frosty silence. My mom gave me a look that could freeze hell over. We sat down, and my dad started off gently. Son, we know you're hurt, but running away isn't the solution. Running away? I snapped. I'm not running away. I'm done. I can't keep pretending everything's fine when it's not. My mom jumped in. What about Emily? She's devastated. You can't just abandon her. She abandoned me first, I shot back. She cheated on me, twice, and you expect me to just forgive and forget? My dad sighed. Marriage is about forgiveness, about working through the tough times. Your mother and I cut him off. I know about Mom's affairs. And if you think I'm going to live the same miserable life, you're wrong. I deserve better. My mom looked shocked. Who told you about that? It doesn't matter, I said. What matters is that I'm not willing to be miserable for the rest of my life. Emily made her choices, and now I'm making mine. The conversation didn't get much better from there. They accused me of being selfish, of not trying hard enough to make things work. But I stood my ground. I knew what I wanted, and it wasn't to be stuck in a loveless marriage with someone who had betrayed me. As I was leaving, my dad said something that stuck with me. You're going to regret this, son. Mark my words. maybe he was right. Maybe I would regret it. But at that moment, I felt like I was finally taking control of my life. I was done being the guy who always put others first, who always forgave and forgot. I was done being the doormat. In the weeks that followed, I focused on moving forward. I met with my lawyer, started the divorce proceedings, and threw myself into my work. My coworker, the one I had an affair with, was a great distraction. We had a lot of fun together, and she helped me forget, even if just for a little while. Emily, meanwhile, continued to stay with my parents. They treated her like a wounded bird, coddling her and trying to mend her broken heart. It was infuriating, but I couldn't do anything about it. I had to focus on myself. One night, after a particularly long day at work, I got a call from Emily. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Hello?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I need to talk to you." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop near my office. When I walked in, she looked like a shadow of her former self, pale, thin, and haunted. We sat down and she immediately started crying. "I'm so sorry," she said between sobs. "I know I've hurt you and I can't take it back, but I love you and I want to make this work." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past few weeks pressing down on me. "Emily, it's too late. You've crossed lines that can't be uncrossed." She reached across the table, grabbing my hand. "I'll do anything," she pleaded. "Please, just give me another chance." I pulled my hand away. "I can't," I said firmly. "I don't love you anymore." Her face crumpled, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered everything she had put me through, and my resolve hardened. "I'm sorry, Emily," I said, standing up, "but this is goodbye." As I walked out of the coffee shop, I felt a strange sense of closure. It wasn't the ending I had imagined for our relationship, but it was the one I needed. I was finally free to move on, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. This was just the beginning of my new life, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next. No more lies, no more betrayal, just a fresh start. And that was something worth fighting for. Leaving that coffee shop was like stepping into a new chapter of my life. It was a clean break, or so I thought. I felt a surge of relief and a sense of freedom I hadn't experienced in years, but new beginnings often come with unexpected twists. After officially moving out of the motel, I found an apartment not too far from work. It wasn't anything fancy, just a one-bedroom place, but it felt like my own. I took pride in decorating it, making it a reflection of who I was now, not who I used to be. There was a certain joy in picking out new furniture and setting up my space just the way I wanted. I threw myself into my work more than ever. It was a welcome distraction, and my performance improved significantly. My bosses noticed, and I started getting more responsibilities, which I welcomed with open arms. Work became my sanctuary, a place where my personal life couldn't touch me. The affair with my coworker, Lisa, continued. It wasn't anything serious, more of a mutual understanding to keep things light and fun. We both knew we weren't looking for a long-term commitment, and that was perfectly fine. Lisa was a breath of fresh air, and our time together was enjoyable, even if it was just a temporary escape. But life has a way of complicating things when you least expect it. One evening, as Lisa and I were wrapping up a late dinner, she looked at me with a seriousness that made me uneasy. "We need to talk," she said, her eyes searching mine. I felt a knot form in my stomach. "About what?" "I'm pregnant," she blurted out, her voice trembling slightly. I stared at her, my mind racing. This was the last thing I expected. "Are you sure?" I finally managed to ask. She nodded. "I took the test 3 times, all positive." My mind was a whirlwind of emotions. On one hand, I felt a pang of fear and uncertainty. This was not part of my plan. On the other hand, there was a strange sense of calm. I had always wanted kids, but the timing and circumstances were far from ideal. "What do you want to do?" I asked, trying to gauge her feelings. Lisa took a deep breath. "I'm keeping it. I understand if you don't want to be involved, but I thought you should know." I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples. "This changes everything." "I know," she said softly. but I want you to be part of this if you're willing." I sat there for a long time, processing everything. Lisa had always been upfront about not wanting anything serious, and now we were facing a serious situation. Despite the shock, I realized that I wanted to step up. I wasn't going to run away from this. "Okay," I said finally. "I'm in. We'll figure this out together." A sense of relief washed over her face. "Thank you," she said, reaching out to hold my hand. "We'll make it work." As we navigated this new reality, my divorce from Emily moved forward. She signed the papers without much fuss, probably realizing that our marriage was truly over. It was a bittersweet moment, but also a necessary one. I needed to close that chapter to fully embrace the new one. Life with Lisa became a strange blend of excitement and anxiety. We started planning for the baby, attending doctor appointments, and discussing the future. It wasn't what either of us had envisioned, but we were committed to making it work. My feelings for Lisa deepened, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a genuine connection. But Emily wasn't completely out of the picture. She continued to stay with my parents, who remained convinced that I would come to my senses and take her back. They couldn't understand my decision and saw Lisa as the reason for my irrational behavior. It created a rift between us that seemed impossible to bridge. One evening, as I was cooking dinner for Lisa, my phone rang. It was my mother. I debated whether to answer, but ultimately decided to pick up. "Hi, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "David, we need to talk," she said, her tone serious. I sighed. "What is it, Mom?" "It's about Emily. She's been really struggling, and I think you should at least talk to her." "Mom, I've made my decision. I'm moving on. Please, just hear her out. For old time's sake." Reluctantly, I agreed to meet Emily one last time. We chose a neutral location, a small park where we used to spend time together. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting on a bench, looking lost. "Hey," I said, sitting down beside her. She looked up, her eyes red from crying. "Hi." There was an awkward silence before she finally spoke. "I know you don't want to hear this, but I'm really sorry. I've been going to therapy and working on myself. I know I messed up, but I still love you." "Emily," I said gently, "I appreciate your apology, but it's too late. I've moved on. I'm with someone else now, and we're having a baby." Her eyes widened in shock. "A baby with her?" "Yes," I said firmly, "and I'm happy. I'm sorry things ended the way they did, but it's time for both of us to move forward." Tears streamed down her face, but she nodded. "I understand. I just wanted to say goodbye properly." We sat in silence for a few more minutes before I stood up to leave. "Goodbye, Emily. I hope you find happiness." "Goodbye, David," she whispered, watching me walk away. As I drove home, I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, sadness, and a hint of hope. Life was unpredictable, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next. Back at the apartment, Lisa greeted me with a smile. "How did it go?" she asked, wrapping her arms around me. "It's over," I said, kissing her forehead. "For real this time." We stood there, holding each other, knowing that despite the chaos and uncertainty, we had each other, and that was enough. With Emily finally out of the picture, I felt like I could truly start over. Life with Lisa and our upcoming baby became my focus. We spent weekends assembling furniture for the nursery, picking out tiny clothes, and arguing over baby names in the best way possible. It was surreal, but also incredibly grounding. Work continued to be my refuge. The added responsibilities and projects kept my mind occupied, and the distraction was welcome. Lisa and I had settled into a comfortable rhythm, balancing our professional and personal lives with the excitement of impending parenthood. But life, as always, had a way of throwing curveballs. One evening, as Lisa and I were enjoying a quiet dinner at home, my phone buzzed with a call from my dad. Given our strained relationship, it was unexpected. "David, we need to talk," he said, his voice grave. "Can it wait, Dad? We're in the middle of dinner." "It's about Emily," he continued, ignoring my question. "She's not doing well." I felt a twinge of guilt, but quickly brushed it aside. "Dad, I've moved on. You need to let this go. It's serious, David. She's in the hospital. That got my attention. I looked at Lisa, who had been listening intently. She gave me a nod, encouraging me to go. Which hospital? I asked, already grabbing my keys. As I drove to the hospital, a flood of emotions washed over me. Despite everything, I didn't want Emily to be hurt or suffering. Memories of our time together, both good and bad, flashed through my mind. When I arrived, my parents were in the waiting room, looking somber. What happened? I asked, my voice tinged with concern. She had a breakdown, my mom said quietly. They think it's severe depression. I took a deep breath, trying to process the information. Despite our past, I couldn't help but feel responsible in some way. I knew she had her issues, but I never imagined it would come to this. Can I see her? I asked. My mom nodded, leading me to her room. Emily looked fragile, a shadow of the person I once knew. She glanced up when I entered, her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and relief. David, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Hey, I said softly, sitting down beside her. How are you feeling? I'm sorry, she said, tears welling up in her eyes. For everything. Emily, this isn't about blame right now. You need to focus on getting better. We talked for a while, mostly about her treatment and what the doctors had said. I kept the conversation light, avoiding any heavy topics. When I left, I promised to check in on her, though I knew it would be difficult. Back at home, I filled Lisa in on what had happened. She listened patiently, holding my hand. You're a good man, David, she said. It's okay to care about her well-being, even after everything. Her support meant the world to me, and it made me realize just how lucky I was to have her in my life. As the days turned into weeks, I continued to check on Emily from time to time, ensuring she was on the path to recovery. Meanwhile, Lisa's pregnancy progressed smoothly. We attended birthing classes together, shopped for more baby essentials, and even started discussing long-term plans. It felt like we were building something solid, a future that was ours alone. Then, one day at work, I received an unexpected visitor. It was Mark, the guy who had been my friend and who Emily had been secretly contacting. He looked nervous, and I couldn't help but feel a surge of anger. What do you want, Mark? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I came to apologize, he said, looking me in the eye. I never meant for things to get so out of hand. I wasn't having an affair with Emily. We were planning a surprise for your birthday, like she said. That doesn't excuse her hiding it from me, I replied coldly. I know, he admitted, but I wanted to set the record straight. I value our friendship, and I'm sorry for any part I played in this mess. I studied his face, searching for any sign of deceit, but he seemed sincere, and a part of me wanted to believe him. Thanks for coming clean, I said finally, but things can't go back to the way they were. I understand, he said, looking genuinely remorseful. If you ever need anything, I'm here. With that, he left, leaving me to process yet another layer of complexity in my already tumultuous life. I told Lisa about the encounter, and she supported my decision to keep my distance from Mark. Trust was a fragile thing, and once broken, it wasn't easily repaired. As we approached the final weeks of Lisa's pregnancy, my focus shifted entirely to preparing for the baby. We were ready, or as ready as we could be. The nursery was complete, our hospital bags were packed, and we had discussed every possible scenario. Then, one early morning, Lisa woke me up, her face contorted with pain. I think it's time, she said, clutching her belly. Adrenaline kicked in, and I sprang into action, grabbing our bags and helping her to the car. The drive to the hospital felt like a blur, a mix of excitement and nerves. When we arrived, the staff quickly whisked Lisa away, and I followed, trying to stay calm. The labor was intense, but Lisa was incredible. I held her hand, encouraging her through every contraction, and before we knew it, our baby girl was born. The moment I heard her cry, tears streamed down my face. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. As I held our daughter for the first time, I felt a profound sense of love and responsibility. This tiny human depended on us, and I was determined to be the best father I could be. Lisa and I were exhausted but overjoyed, and as we sat there holding our newborn, I knew that this was the start of something truly special. In the following weeks, we settled into our new roles as parents. It was challenging, but also incredibly rewarding. Every sleepless night and every diaper change was worth it when we saw our daughter's first smile or heard her coo. Emily's situation continued to improve, and I maintained a cordial relationship with her, ensuring she was on the right path. My parents eventually came around, realizing that my happiness with Lisa and our baby was what mattered most. Life had thrown me some serious curveballs, but I had come out stronger on the other side. With Lisa and our daughter by my side, I felt ready to face whatever came next. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly at peace. Life after Mia's birth was a whirlwind. Our new city, new routines, and the ever-present demands of parenthood filled our days. Lisa and I worked hard to create a stable home for our daughter, though the specter of our past challenges loomed ever-present. Just when we thought we were finding our groove, an unexpected knock on the door shattered our fragile calm. It was Chris, Lisa's ex, standing on our doorstep. His presence alone was enough to send a chill down my spine. "David," he said, his voice tense, "I need to talk to Lisa." I stared at him, anger and protectiveness flaring up. "What do you want?" "I need to see her. It's about Mia." Lisa appeared at the door, her face paling at the sight of Chris. "Chris, what are you doing here?" "I just found out about Mia," he said, his voice trembling. "I want to be part of her life." The air was thick with tension. "Chris, this is a lot to take in," Lisa said, glancing at me for support. "We need to talk." Reluctantly, I agreed to let them speak privately. As they stepped outside, I watched through the window, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. The conversation seemed intense, their expressions shifting from anger to sorrow to confusion. When Lisa returned, her face was a mix of emotions. "He wants to be part of Mia's life," she said quietly. "And what do you want?" I asked, my heart pounding. "I don't know," she admitted. "This is so complicated." The days that followed were filled with tension and uncertainty. We had countless late-night discussions, weighing the pros and cons of allowing Chris into Mia's life. Trust was a fragile thing, and the thought of letting him back in was terrifying. Ultimately, we decided to allow Chris supervised visits. Mia deserved to know her biological father, even if it meant complicating our lives. The visits were awkward at first, but Mia's joy in having another loving presence was undeniable. Just when we thought things couldn't get more complicated, my phone buzzed with an unexpected message from Emily. "David, I'm moving to a new city, starting a new job and hoping for a fresh start. Thank you for everything. Take care." I showed the message to Lisa, who nodded. "I'm glad she's moving on." "Me too," I replied, feeling a strange mix of relief and closure. Life continued to be a roller coaster. My promotion at work brought new challenges, and Lisa's home business began to flourish. We juggled our careers, parenting, and the ever-present dynamic with Chris. It felt like we were constantly on edge, never quite knowing what the next day would bring. One evening, as we were putting Mia to bed, Lisa winced in pain. "I think it's just stress," she said, brushing it off. But I wasn't convinced. We made a doctor's appointment, and the news hit us like a freight train. Lisa was pregnant again. The initial shock gave way to joy, but also a new layer of complexity. We were thrilled to be expanding our family, but the timing was anything but perfect. With Chris's involvement and the demands of our jobs, it felt like we were walking a tightrope. As Lisa's pregnancy progressed, our relationship with Chris grew more complicated. He was genuinely trying, but old wounds were hard to heal. There were moments of tension, heated arguments, and difficult conversations. But through it all, we kept our focus on what mattered most: Mia and our growing family. The day finally came when Lisa went into labor. The drive to the hospital was a blur of excitement and fear. The labor was intense, but Lisa was incredible. When our son, Ethan, was born, the room was filled with his cries and our tears of joy. Holding Ethan for the first time, I felt a profound sense of love and responsibility. Our family had grown, and despite all the chaos, it felt complete. We brought Ethan home, adjusting to life with a newborn once again. The sleepless nights, the diaper changes, the endless feedings, It was exhausting but beautiful. However, just when we thought we could finally settle into our new normal, another curveball came our way. One afternoon, Chris arrived unexpectedly, his face ashen. "David, Lisa, I need to talk to you, it's urgent." We invited him in, anxiety prickling at the back of my neck. "What's going on?" Lisa asked, her voice steady but strained. Chris took a deep breath, his hands shaking. "I've been diagnosed with a serious illness. I need to know that Mia will be taken care of if something happens to me." The room fell silent. The weight of his words hung heavy in the air. "Chris, I'm so sorry," Lisa said, reaching out to him. "We'll make sure Mia is cared for no matter what." The revelation added a new layer of complexity to our already complicated lives. We had to navigate Chris's illness, the emotional toll it took on Mia, and our own fears for the future. But through it all, Lisa and I remained a united front. As Chris's health declined, we became more involved in his care. Mia, too young to fully understand, sensed the gravity of the situation. She spent more time with Chris, forging a bond that would last a lifetime. One evening, as we sat by Chris's bedside, he took my hand. "David, I know we've had our differences, but I want to thank you for everything. For Mia, for your support, for being the father she needs." His words struck a chord deep within me. "We'll take care of her, Chris. I promise." In his final days, Chris found peace, surrounded by those who loved him. His passing was a profound loss, but it also brought a sense of closure and unity. We mourned him, but we also celebrated his life and the love he had for Mia. In the months that followed, life slowly found a new rhythm. We adjusted to being a family of 4, cherishing every moment together. The challenges we had faced had forged an unbreakable bond between us. Looking back, I realized that the trials and tribulations had shaped us in ways we could never have imagined. We had faced betrayal, heartbreak, and uncertainty, but we had emerged stronger, more resilient, and deeply connected. Our journey was far from over, but we faced it with a renewed sense of hope and determination. With Lisa, Mia, and Ethan by my side, I felt ready for whatever the future held. And as I watched my children play, their laughter filling the air, I knew that despite all the twists and turns, we had built a life worth living. A life filled with love, joy, and endless possibilities.